Hold on.
It's recording.
Record.
Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to How True is True, Writing and Drawing the Comic Memoir. Thank you to WonderCon for allowing us to do this and bring this to you, even though we couldn't be together in person. Everybody's here on our computers, which is the way we do things now. I want to start by introducing all of the panelists to you. First, I will introduce Cecil Castellucci, is the award-winning and New York Times bestselling author of books and graphic novels for young adults, including The Plain Janes, Shade the Changing Girl, Soupy Leaves Home, and many, many others. She's done work for Disney. She's doing did a Star Wars book, and she's doing The Little Mermaid and some other princess comics, and she's currently writing Batgirl. She's also been a musician and has written 2 opera librettos, which I find fascinating because I don't know anything about that. Her memoir is Girl on Film from Archaia. Anything you want to add, Cecil? What did I miss?
Nope, that's it.
You're all good, okay. AJ, can you pronounce your last name so I get it right?
Dungo.
Okay, AJ Dungo is an American surfer and an illustrator, and he attended Art Center College of Design. He's worked as an illustrator with Nike, Visa, and the New York Times. His work has been recognized by American Illustration and the Society of Illustrators, and he just published what I think is his first graphic novel, the memoir In Waves with No Brow. All good, AJ?
Great, thank you.
Okay. And Sina Grace has been editorial director for Skybound and worked as a writer and an artist for Marvel and IDW and Boom and Dynamite and Valiant and more. He is the artist on Little Depressed Boy. He's a co-writer and artist on the Image Comics hit series Burn the Orphanage.
Oh wait, this is a really old bio.
Yeah, okay, well, I'm reading. Okay, you can add to it. And recently out is the collected first volume of Ghosted in LA, which I really want to read. I'm going to go get that as soon as we're done here. His autobiographical works include Nothing Lasts Forever, Self-Obsessed, and Not My Bag. What's newer that I didn't say?
No, it's just like, I was like, oh, right, note to self.
Update the bio on your website.
Yeah, no, mainly known for doing Iceman at Marvel Comics, and then right now, now I have a brain fart. Oh, and let's just bring up Jughead's Time Police at Archie Comics. I loved working on that book, and it just came out in book form this year. But yeah, Ghost in LA, Volume 1, out now. Anyway.
Yeah, I actually just I did an interview, and I said that I thought that Ghosted in LA was such a good sort of read-alike for our situation, because it's like these 5 ghosts from different time periods stuck in a house in Los Angeles, and I was like, I feel like we can all relate to those ghosts.
Didn't mean for that to happen, but golly,
yeah,
a plot device is relatable.
For sure. Okay, so we're going to focus on memoir. This is a panel about autobiography and memoir, and I want to talk about what made you want to create memoir. I mean, when I look at it and I see how personal some of this work is, I see how brave you all are to put that out there into the world, and I just want to know what made you want to do this. And I know, Sina, you've done more of it than the rest of us, but maybe you want to start with why write about yourself?
I guess I'll start too. The first one that I did, Not My Bag, came from working at a department store, and it being such a weird sequence of actual events in terms of just corporate gaslighting, and then some personal events cascading and coalescing, like in the midst of me quitting this job, that I just remembered being like, oh my God, this is a good story. Like, as it's happening, even though I'm like fuming or, having all these emotions. So I started, and like most things I do, it started out as revenge. I thought, I'll show all these people, I'll make a book about them, I'll make a lot of money off of them, and they won't see a penny of it. And that was the first thing, the first reason it came out of me. And then catharsis sort of motivated the other stuff I did. And then when, you meet people who say things like they soothed or healed by anything I went through or any process I was able to expand upon, then that kind of makes you be like, oh, I gotta keep doing this, or I gotta finish whatever story I set out to accomplish.
So the reactions to the first couple that you did spurred you to do more?
Not the first, just I think like when I did Self-Obsessed and people seemed to appreciate kind of like things I didn't think would make for interesting memoir or matter to anyone else besides myself. And it's that feeling of, I guess it's like, people feeling seen. And so I just thought, okay, I'll exist a little more. And then the third one, Nothing Lasts Forever, was not even meant to really be published. And then I showed people I super respected, comic artists I respect, and they're like, oh, this is the book. This is not you figuring out what your next book is. Like, this is the book. And I was like, no, these are sketchbook pages. And because I'm talking with confidence now, but I did not trust the experience as it was happening. I was just you kind of react and make, and then I personally have to rely on people around me to say, no, this is the book. Like, go ahead and do this. It's going to be fine. People are going to want it or need it or react well to it.
That's great. Cecil or AJ, do either one of you want to address that? Like, why make a memoir?
I have a lot of cool anecdotes, and I think like a lot of people I know are always like, oh my God, you should write a memoir someday, just because I had like such interactions with people who became part of pop culture, who were part of pop culture. But I never really thought of doing it per se. I thought maybe I'd do a book of essays when I was like 80 or something. But Sierra Hahn, my editor who I'd worked with on a book called Soupy Leaves Home, she was at Archaea and had asked me if I was interested in maybe writing a book based on my time being in a punk band, in a riot girl band in the 90s. And I was like, no, if I do that, I would want it to be fiction. I wouldn't want to write a memoir about that. And I was like, but I would like to talk about failure and art and sort of intersection of like how you become who you are as an artist. And I find that like everybody I know who's does art of any kind thought that they were going in one direction, and then suddenly they ended up in a completely different place. Like, how many actors do you know who are like, oh, I thought I was a rodeo clown, and now I'm an Academy Award-winning actor, or like whatever. Or I just find that people kind of stumble their way into the art that they're supposed to make. And I had always wanted to be the world's greatest filmmaker, and every single choice that I made in my entire life growing up was to become the world's greatest film director. And clearly that's not what happened at all. But then on top of that, as I was writing it, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, I realized I was remembering everything wrong. And, nothing that the stories that I told about what happened, like meeting Andy Warhol or what this person did to me, when I would look back at my journals, it was totally different than the way that I tell the story now. And other people, when I would ask them, people that were there, they would say, oh no, remember, this is how it happened. I was like, what's happening? Conveniently, my dad is a world-renowned neurobiologist who's does research, and his specialty, his whole life's work was the mechanics of memory, how we store long and short-term memories. So part of the book is also me, talking to my dad about why it's important to remember and forget.
Excellent, thanks. And AJ, I know that your project started out as one thing and then sort of changed course, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. To piggyback on Cecil's comments about memory and also just stumbling into the art you're supposed to make, that really resonates with me, because I'm pretty green, I'm pretty fresh in this industry, or whatever you want to call it, but I like certain things happened in my life that sort of catapulted me into sort of doing this, and it did, like you said, it started as a school project, and then it became a request from a publisher for me to turn what I had made into a book. And then the book that they had requested, they changed their mind and wanted me to add like a personal narrative to it. And what my publisher didn't know was that my partner of 8 years had passed away from cancer, and that I was living through this sort of like the worst period of my life. And he asked me to write about it. And then that's sort of how I'm here at this panel right now, is just, someone asking me to do something that I didn't know that I was planning to do, but sort of just fell into it.
Yeah, well, I think we're all glad you did. This book is amazing. I want to go back to what Cecil was talking about a minute ago, which is the idea of memory. When you're writing these books, what are you relying on? Are you trying to tell the truth? Are you using reference and journals and talking to other people to make sure that it's true? Or are you just going with what you remember and using that as your art? I know, Cecil, because you had your dad, you've interspersed that conversation with him about the nature of memory throughout the book, which I found a super interesting thing to do.
Yeah, I think talking with my dad about the nature of memory, the mechanics of memory, and part of the book, like I said, is a neuroscience lesson, kind of gave me permission to get as close to the truth as possible while not 100% telling the truth. Because I think that's one of the things that is really fascinating, is that sometimes by not telling the truth exactly as it happened, you get closer to the sort of emotional truth, or the sort of core truth of what actually happened. And one fascinating thing that I learned from my dad is that, memories are very plastic, right? And as we grow, we change the nature of the way that we relate to memories, because we have more experience or more wisdom. Something that you experienced as a child, you may have better context for it when you're older because you've gone through X, Y, and Z. You may experience a traumatic event, and the way that you would look at something like that before that happened, or the way that you look at it after that happened, sort of changes the nature of the way that you remember your own life, because things change. And so that kind of gave me permission to write the story as I remembered it, with complete authority, because I was also 100% admitting that I was remembering everything not incorrectly. But it's the way that I remembered it, So, I mean, like in my dedication, I say, thanks to all the people I remembered, I forgot to, or thanks to all the people I forgot to remember, and and to all the people that I remembered to forget, because that's the way we do it. We edit sort of our lives. So yeah, I relied on friends, I relied on journals, and I relied on my own memory. And then that gave me permission to change things as I wanted to, or to combine people into one person. And my biggest flag that I was following, or star that I was following, was do no harm. I wanted to do no harm to other people, and I wanted to do no harm to myself.
Yeah, I want to get into that in a minute, but I'm interested to hear from the other two. Sina, yours is Nothing Lasts Forever is based on a journal, right? Isn't that an old journal of yours?
Sort of. Well, yeah, it's a couple of it started out as some journal entries and some passages. And that's kind of what was super weird about it, was it's very in the moment. And for people who haven't read that book, because I think only 1,000 people have read it in the whole world, which is a lot of people. But anyway, it's about me getting very sick, and then dealing with some career stuff, and then also dealing with kind of reconciling just the totality of being in your 20s, and I would say it's me kind of putting the lid on my 20s, but in a really intense and painful way. So anyway, yeah, some of it was done very much in the moment. And then I think I did the opposite of what Cecil did, which is, instead of kind of trying to get as close to the truth as possible to then focus on my truth, I kind of clung to, hold on, my dog is being so antsy. Come here.
Hi.
I have a dog. He's part of it. He wasn't even in any of this. That's what's so funny, is he was, this is Henry. He was a part of that whole journey, but I didn't put him in the book because he didn't make sense. It's what are you going to do with this dog when you're you don't have to explain the dog away if the dog doesn't exist. so I kind of clung to the phrase, "That's how I choose to remember it." And luckily, because so much of it was focused on like my journey, that not many other people could be harmed, I didn't really have to run into that. And then the people who were kind of speaking characters in it, I would just show them the pages and then just be like, all right, this is gonna happen. Like, you don't have a say. So the only thing you can say is whether or not we're changing your name. And one of the characters did ask to have his name changed. And something I did on purpose was, like, you can even see the eraser marks where I smudge over his real name and then write his fake name. And that's the fun thing about that book, is like, it's all drawn in pencil. It's all very sketchy and loose, hand lettered, and kind of leans into the fallacy of memory. And that's why I also go super, sorry, I'm talking a lot. I'll finish after this. Even my dog is bored. But I just kind of play with sort of like the blurriness of reality with that. And that's why there are just so many visual scenes in it, because it's like, it's a comic book. I'm like, yeah, I have wings in this scene, whatever. So yeah, I did a opposite Cecil move. Now I want to hear about AJ though.
Yeah, AJ, you're started at your book is, for people who haven't seen it, it's part history of surfing, and it's part your memoir, and the two are sort of alternating within the story. How did you go about the memoir part?
I was more in Cecil's vein with this one, in terms of it was heavily researched, at least the historic part, like, because I was dealing with two narratives, one that's, I guess, belongs to me and to my partner, and then one that belongs to a very important and sort of solitary cultural phenomenon that is Hawaii. And I was walking on eggshells there, because this doesn't belong to me. The story doesn't belong to me. I'm sort of standing on the shoulders of giants, of people who've written this before, and just a ton of reading and research. But in terms of my own story, it was an exercise in remembering, because where I was at that time was, it was so important for me to not forget. As someone leaves you, or if you lose someone important to you, you're constantly trying to gather as much as you can, and remember as much as you can, not forget, because anything other than that, like, if you move forward in life at all, it seems like a disservice or disrespectful to that person you lost. So at least, that's where I was at the time. So it was very important for me to, like, share this story and sort of keep her alive in this book. And it's a very it's my futile attempt to keep her around, I think. And there's this line from this band, you guys may have heard it, but this band called Mount Erie, he has a song, he wrote an album about, like, his wife who passed away from cancer. And there's this line that always gets me, but sort of relates to this conversation, where he says, did you like foxgloves? I can't remember now. You did most of my remembering for me. So that one really hits, because this story is so much less because she's not here. And I think I just try to do my.
Oh no.
Oh, AJ.
Oh no, AJ, come back.
Oh.
AJ.
Cry without him. I'm
Okay,
sure
he'll be back.
yeah, his internet will pick up again.
Yeah.
Gosh, sorry, we're all just.
I know. Wait, sorry, AJ, you went away.
Back.
Are you back?
No, he's coming in and out.
Oh.
Oh.
That's okay. We'll keep talking, and when his internet picks back up, hopefully
It is really interesting what he was saying, because that's one thing that really struck me when I was talking with my dad. And I'd said to him at some point, it's as though we're all each other's keepers of memories. And so, I think that's really true. Like, we, like, the parts that we don't remember, we sort of have other people remember for us. And so it's like we seed memories to other people.
And AJ's back.
We lost you, AJ, for a second.
Back? Oh, that's okay.
You're still cutting
Yeah,
in.
I'm sorry about that. Is
So
it okay now?
yeah, I think so.
Is it still shaking?
You were saying, you were talking about the foxglove thing, and
Right,
then you went out.
right. So, what I realized though is like I started showing people this, and then my editor was like, it's so much from your own perspective that you're missing. Like my partner seems very two-dimensional. And I realized like that's an opportunity to ask her family and ask like her friends, because people we're writing about don't belong to us. They're more than that, so I realized like it's important to incorporate other people's perspectives on it. So I think that's where I was going with that. But
yeah, and that actually leads into the next question. Memoirs and autobiography, it's about you. It's, that's what the format is, but it's also about other people. And you guys have talked about this a little bit. How are you careful about how you present other people? And I know, Cecil, you talked about do no harm, but then also did the process of creating this, and once you've put it out into the world, has this changed your relationships in any way with the people who are around you or the people who appeared in the book?
Can you ask that again? Like the last part of it, I was like, I was like wrapping myself around one part of it, and then it kind of felt, it was two-pronged.
Right, two-pronged. So one, how did you go about including other people in the book? Cecil talked about her do no harm philosophy. And you talked a bit about letting them, if they wanted to change their name, did you let them have input? I know, you sometimes got memories from people. But then on the other hand, how did it change your relationship with anyone? Did anything come out of this after the book was out in the world where something is different for you?
There was a minute where I think people would want, like something would happen and then they'd be like, oh cool, this is gonna like make it in something. And it's like, that doesn't work that way. Like almost like, and that even happens with yourself, where if you're kind of in an abusive relationship with Memoir, like you put yourself in situations to tell a story, because then you'll have the story. I think that was I'm trying to think. I don't know. People would get weird and not want stuff to end up in things, and I guess I'll admit, like, they didn't trust me to keep that, like it's there's like keeping a secret, and then there's like, don't put it in your book. like that's the new version of like, don't tell anyone. But I only have that as a gestural, like I only have that in the broad strokes. I don't have a specific example per se, but I do know that there are people who just didn't want to be in, they don't want to be included. And then you have to work around that if they imparted something that speaks to, what the message is or what you're trying to convey to a reader. And that's when you have to kind of play with the truth.
I didn't really ask anyone. I just kind of wrote it because I knew that I was also framing it as my sort of desire to become a filmmaker, and that I was going to put sort of these flourishes on everything. And I knew that I was going to take care of people. And also some people, I think the person I'm meanest to is Jennifer Aniston. And I
You're
love
meanest
her.
to Martha Plimpton.
Oh, that's true. Martha Plimpton. But, but those people are in the public, whatever. And I'm not even really that mean to them. You know what I mean? Like, I take responsibility for what happened just as much as, they do, because it's sort of easy to frame, and sort of like, like with Jennifer, it's that, like, I remember her ditching me to go hang out with Robert Downey Jr. and Anthony Michael Hall. And maybe I think that happened, maybe it happened. But the truth is that, we all ditch friends in high school. And I take ownership of that. We all hurt people's feelings in high school. We all feel left out. We all feel like someone's got like a better thing. And so, I feel like there's a more universal truth to that. The only person that, I had said, I'd gone out to lunch with Mo Willems, who was my freshman mentor in college. And I said, oh, you're going to be in my memoir. And he was like, oh God. But then I was like, no, don't worry about it. It's going to be great. so, but because I knew I wasn't really going to hurt, it wasn't about them. And I didn't want them to have their story overwhelm my story, because it was about my decision of becoming an artist and trying to go to be an artist. The only thing that I wanted to make sure of was, one of my best friends in high school is Chaz Bono. And obviously when Chaz and I were friends in high school, Chaz was not a man. And so I chose to have Chaz be remembered as a boy, because that's the way that he identifies now. And I did email him and just say, hey, just so you, because I had to clear up a question about his birthday party where I met Andy Warhol. And I was like, hey, and just so you know, I'm doing this memoir, and it's about me and, my journey as an artist. And obviously you're in it. Just so you know, they're going to draw you as a boy. So, because I felt like that was the person that I needed to make sure that they knew, because I didn't want that to be a surprise to him in any way.
Yeah.
I do. If AJ, may I jump back in for 1 second?
Please.
Okay, I do actually have a good specific example, because so through the 3 books, Not My Bag, Self-Obsessed, and Nothing Lasts Forever, there is a high school teacher who, for lack of a better term, and whatever, read the books, find out. But we had gotten back in touch, and it was already kind of weird and tenuous and tumultuous. And then one day, this happened last year, he shows me a picture. He's like, I came back from spring break, and these were in my mailbox at the school. And it was all 3 of my books with a typed note that said, thought you should read these. And he was like, what's in them? And I was like, and I think I had told him, but I was like, it doesn't matter. It's my experience, and you didn't do anything illegal. So whatever. And it was so uncomfortable, and it was so painful to have to I didn't want him to read the books, but then I just basically it was like I was 17 all over again. I was just yeah, I'm wrong, you're right, whatever, just don't read them, blah, blah. And we haven't spoken since, and it was just it was such a terrible experience. But that person, I have gone back and forth on whether or not he should have seen that material. And as I get older and learn more about the ways you can be controlled or manipulated or taken advantage of, the more I'm like, no, what you did is still empirically wrong. Even if whatever, when you read the books, it's no, I didn't get touched, but a grown-up shouldn't have, had those interactions with a 14-year-old boy. So that was, there's my example.
That's an example. Switching gears completely.
Wait, what about AJ?
I'm going to go to AJ.
Oh, okay.
We have to switch gears completely, because it's the same subject, but in a very different way. AJ, you include some pieces in your book where you're talking to her brother and some other people that knew her well, and those are very touching. And I'm wondering if that was, you talked earlier about you added those in later. I think he's frozen again.
Oh no.
Okay. So we were talking about other people and how they're included in a memoir, and there's some beautiful pieces in your book where you're talking to other people about her. How did those come about, and did that, how was your relationship with those people from doing that?
So yeah, I mean, there was that point in the book where I was submitting drafts back and forth, and like I said earlier, my editor was saying Kristins written kind of flat, she doesn't seem like a real person. And I realized that's because I'm telling it only from my point of view, and it's so limited. So that's when I realized it was the perfect opportunity to introduce her family, who knew her well. And being Filipino, it's a whole thing. You have a humongous family, and everyone is everyone's best friend, and you're just super connected. And writing this book, there was nothing super controversial. There wasn't anything that would ever.
Oh no.
One moment of hesitation when Oh shit.
No, you're back.
Are you good? Am I still here?
Yeah.
Are we
you're
good?
Yeah, go. Well, now he froze again.
Sorry about that.
Okay. You were
Good.
saying one moment of hesitation?
The one moment I had of hesitation was depicting her mother in one scene, and it was about, you know, a moment of weakness for a mother, like with her dying daughter, and I was thinking of editing that out, but it was so beautiful and poignant of a moment that I kept it in. And she also gave me her blessing to write whatever I wanted to. So that was sort of like, I didn't ask her, but she did say that before. So I kind of like fell back on that. And I was like, okay, but you said, and I think, you know, she gets to redeem herself in her own words, you know, when I interviewed her later. Whew, am I still connected?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
Okay.
lovely. Yeah, we, you know, talking about our relationships, your relationships with others, I want to know about the process for you personally. What was it like for you to, you know, write about yourself? Was it cathartic? Did it help you as sort of a form of therapy? Was it really awful? How did it change your sort of your relationship with yourself going through this process?
I mean, I think it was very healing in a way to go back and to sort of, because my book is about sort of me failing at what I thought I was going to do. It kind of gave me a nice way of being like, yeah, you might have failed, and maybe your like 7-year-old self would yell at you, but she would still think you were pretty cool and that you were doing a cool thing. So it kind of like healed and soothed the wound of like, well, I never got to do that thing, you know? And then there were like some interesting, you know, like my father and I had never, you know, I was in a terrorist bombing when I was little, and my father and I had never talked about it. And we had, you know, we remember radically different things about that moment. And it was just really nice to have that connection, you know, to have a conversation with my family, with my dad, about this very, very huge moment in our lives, both of our lives, that we had never spoken about for like 35 years, you know, or, you know, so that was very healing as well, because I think it sort of brought, you know, it brought me closer to the friends and the situations that I held dear.
Do you want to go next, AJ? Should I?
Oh, please.
Okay, I will. I will, only because you're freezing a lot. Well, Nothing Lasts Forever was very like, I think, learning to be okay with myself and learning to accept things. And there were a couple of instances where I didn't know whether or not to put some like low points in. And it's because I have I have a kind of sensitive nose to like trauma porn, where sometimes I feel like people exploit the darkest parts of, and like none of the people in this conversation are that. Like I'll like, you know, like I don't love Ocean Vuong's book, like, and I'm like one of like one people who is I'm the only person who's just like, I think it's torture porn. Like I just think he literally like, you know, poeticized like the worst aspects of his life and got a genius grant for it. Like, I don't, you know, so I try to make sure that there's a point when I do stuff like that. And there were a few things where I talk about a period where like I'd started cutting myself, and I'm not a cutter, and it only happened twice, but there was a reason for it. And then I just decided, like, put that in the book, like where you don't want to talk about these things, but you have to talk about these things because depression and pain manifest so differently in each person. And maybe if you talk about giving yourself the space to accept that your sadness looks different than other people's sadness, that maybe they can then do that and not compartmentalize the same way. So it was difficult to expose that, not for fear of like being vulnerable for a reader, but more wondering if there was an actual point, or if I was exploiting something in order to, you know, garner some kind of reaction from the reader, when like that's the last thing I want. Like I really wanted to try and tell, you know, like kind of an on the ground, organic, weird experience, and you know, hopefully people get something out of it, not like give me an award because I just cut a vein open on the page for you. Yeah, so that was sort of my journey with exposing myself to other people.
For my experience, it was cutting a vein, but for no one. I was just doing it because I needed to, you know, like I was going through something that, you know, the accolades and things that have followed, I wasn't even thinking that far in advance. I didn't even think about people reading it. I just needed to finish it because all that existed was my grief and then this deadline I had from a publisher, and that's it. So I was just trying to finish, but also it was painful, obviously, but it was also a not cool, but it was like a very precious time to sift through memories and spend time with someone I lost, and sort of find a way to say all the things I couldn't. And yeah, that's all that was. It was very a cathartic experience, but it was really a solitary one. I didn't really show anyone anything until it was published. Like no one didn't see anything except for the people that were in the book, obviously, but because I was asking them questions. But even then, they didn't see any drafts, or so it seemed like for 3 years I was just avoiding people and telling people I was writing a book. But I'm happy that I have something to show for all that time spent alone.
Yeah, that's everybody's process is different. You know, the more creators you talk to, the more you realize what a singular thing it is to each person. And then I wanted to ask a little bit, you know, about process. Cecil, you're a writer. You worked with artists who had to depict you, which must have been an interesting experience. And then for Sina and AJ, how is it creating yourself on the page, not just in writing, but literally an image of yourself? Does working on paper feel different than working digitally? Is it, you know, do you draw yourself and then say, no, that doesn't look like me, and start over? Or is it past that point and you're just trying to get the information on the page? Just a little bit about process. I'd be really interested to hear that. You want to start with AJ this time?
Sure. I mean, it's definitely the latter thing you mentioned. You know, at a certain point, you sort of have to accept all the imperfections and just say like, well, this is going out because I don't have any time to fuss over it. But I tried to stay pretty true about people's features or likenesses. But it is fun to like to sort of make someone into a cartoon. But what was the other aspect of your question? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just thinking about process. Do you work on paper? Do you work digitally? Does the process of making your art, is that you know, is that an emotional thing for you at all, or?
It's pretty no. It's like at that point I'm executing, so I'm sort of, I think the hard part is writing for me. So I was really straining to get the words out, but drawing is something I'm a bit more familiar with. So it was sort of like my wheelhouse, and I was comfortable. But I did try to do it all analog at first, and it was just a nightmare because realizing how many different steps there are as opposed to doing it digitally. And then I had a certain page count that it was unfathomable to do. You know, I'm not Chris Ware. I can't like spend 10 years on this thing. And, you know, sounds like a pretty lame excuse, but I did have a tight deadline. So it was all digital, and it was that was the easy part for me, I think, was the drawing and the art, but the writing was tough.
Yeah, because you were creating yours from nothing, and whereas Sina, you were working with some existing material already, right?
Yeah, and I had also drawn myself a few hundred times before that. And what was the way I draw myself is I've adopted the like, my friend Justin Hall talks about this. Like he said, like, you Tintined yourself. You boiled yourself down to the simplest features so everyone can see themselves in you. So it's like, you know, and I think I talk about that in Self-Obsessed, where like I did like the cartoon version of me next to like how I see myself, and it's like whatever version you see, as long as you don't see what I see, is all that counts. And I try to do memoir-y stuff by hand, and I think it's just because I still feel like I've got better skills when I'm working with pencil, pen, and paper than like even digitally, where it's like, oh, I can just stick in a photograph and then there's the background. Like I still feel like there's something I can't pull off, my wrist can't do on an iPad that it can do on paper. So, you know, and I did the opposite of what AJ did, where it's like I just sacrificed quality. I was like, okay, these pages are just going to be fucking chicken scratch, but like it'll still be hand drawn. So one of these days I'll switch roles and I'll try to do something digitally and see if I can get better at it. But yeah, that's my process. And then also another bit of advice I got from a writer friend. I can't outline. That's why these things always, I can outline prose, or not prose, fiction or whatever else, but I can't with memoir. And I told him how I did my first book, which is like I would create the sequences that were clear in my head, and then bridge them by drawing, you know, what needed to happen between to get the character where he is. And he basically was like, if that's how you do it, that's how you do it. If you need to make a big mess and then look at the mess and find, you know, the book, then that's how you make the book. And with Nothing Lasts Forever, it was literally that. Like I knew it was going to be 10 chapters. I had the chapter breaks, I had the pages, and I just, you know, the last 2 weeks were just, you know, torn out pages, art boards, everything on the floor, and me just kind of moving pieces of paper around, trying to figure out like what matters, what doesn't matter, where does it go, what's the theme of this chapter, you know, how many sick pages versus how many like me having sex with men pages, like and so yeah, I just make a big mess. And I think, you know, for people who are out there wondering about this for themselves, like it's okay to make a mess and find the journey within the mess. Cecil.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you know, I just want to like point out that there are 4 different artists on Girl on Film. There's Vicky Lida, Melissa Duffy, V. Gagnon, and John Berg, and they each took a different section of my life. And Vicky Lida did the memory parts, the brain parts, the conversation with my dad. And what I really loved about it is that, you know, so Melissa Duffy had me in elementary school and childhood, and V. Gagnon had sort of high school, and then John Berg had college. And what I loved is that Melissa's is very, very solid, you know, and when you move through, it becomes a little bit more lyrical when it comes to V. Gagnon, and then much more scratchy, sort of like blocky when it comes to John Berg. And I liked the way that kind of, you know, and then Vicky Lida's is very dreamy because it's the memory stuff. And what I like about that is that it kind of shows how we have these sort of solid memories, you know, childhood, something that is really kind of ingrained in there. And that as we get closer to the present, it kind of becomes more sort of, you know, loosey-goosey, because it's like just sort of, you know, your short-term, your recent, you know, kind of thing. And will it be stored to your long-term memory or won't it, you know? So I really liked that. And that was an idea that Sierra Hahn, my editor, had to have different artists to do that. And usually when I work with an artist on a comic book, I work very closely, and I'm talking to them all the time, and we're texting, or, you know, but and not in like a way where I'm like, you gotta do this, but like more like it, because it's a collaboration together. But with this one, I really leaned on Sierra a lot more than I usually do. I leaned on my editor a lot more, because I realized that I had to give over my life to other people, and I had to have them interpret what the truth was of a moment. And it might not have matched up exactly with the way that I thought of it in my head. And I didn't want there to be a single moment where I made any of the 4 of them feel as though I were like, boop, 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 you know, like, can't do that. I wanted them to feel they had as much permission to, you know, to sort of interpret my script and my life and me and my friends and everything that I am in their own way, without without too much, you know, sort of, you know, manhandling by, you know, by me on there. And so, and I felt like I needed to have a psychic distance from that. So that was like a very different process for me, because I wanted it, because I really do believe that one of the greatest thing about comics and about working with an artist, I mean, it's my favorite thing in the world, is that collaboration, is that letting go of the story and having someone else pick up the baton. That's what makes comics great. And, but it is a little bit more different when it's your life, you know, and you're like, I don't look like that. What, do I look like a man like this? Like, what is happening? You know, aren't I prettier? Like, that person was way hotter than you put them, like, whatever. That's not helpful, you know, because it doesn't matter. And what was brilliant about all four of them is that they completely 100% captured the spirit of everybody. And, you know, I'd given them lots and lots of reference materials and stuff. And so, yeah, so it was very interesting to, you know, it's a lot different handing over Batgirl to somebody. I mean, I care about Batgirl a lot, but I don't care about her as much as I care about me. So, so it was different, but wonderful. And I think they all did an incredible job.
Yeah, I love how all of your experiences were so very different because you're very different people, and the books are very different, you know, even in a genre like memoir, but you know, the books are as different as the people are, which I think is fantastic. We're down to about 5 minutes to go, and I just wanted to give you each a chance to sort of do any wrap up that you want to do, and then to share with us anything else that you have coming up, or anything about I was going to say appearances, but digital appearances,
right here.
signings, how they can get your book, anything like that. So Cecil, you want to go first?
Sure. So I guess, well, I'm doing Batgirl. So I have that. Yeah. Girl on Film is the book. You can get it at all your fine local independent bookstores and your local comic book shop. Please support them. I do Batgirl, but also I have a new graphic novel that came out with Jim Rugg. It's a omnibus of books 1 and 2 and a new book 3 of the Plain Janes.
So good, so good.
Which is the first comic that I ever did that just got released on Little Brown. And you can find me on the internets, on Twitter at Miss Cecil, and on Instagram at Cecil C. Skull.
Excellent. Sina. Here's
yeah, Nothing Lasts Forever, Ghost in LA, bookshop.org is a way to get some books. And luckily with the name like mine, it's really easy to kind of own your internet space. So I'm at Sina Grace on all of the things. And anyway, yeah.
AJ?
You can find me on Instagram at AgeDungs, a nickname from middle school that still follows me around. And if you're in Paris in the wintertime, I have
What's
Paris
happening?
in the wintertime, wait.
What's happening in Paris in wintertime?
He's so good at chapter break. You always want to know what happens next.
What's happening in Paris in wintertime?
Is it Frozen? Are we
Okay,
good?
No, you're back.
Oh, he was back. Just for a
Go
second.
ahead, Gary.
I'm sure if you go to his website, we'll find out what happened.
Chat, put in the chat. What's happening? Oh, wait, you're back. Paris in wintertime. What's happening? Do you have an exhibit?
I have a solo show at Gallery Barbie.
Oh, hey.
Pigalle.
Nice.
Nice.
Beautiful.
All right, trip to Paris. See you
Yes.
there.
And I can honestly say I highly recommend all of these books. They are excellent. I will be honest, Sina, I wasn't sure I was going to like this book. I thought we don't have anything in common. I'm not, by about halfway through, I was just absolutely riveted. And by the time I got to the end, I was in tears. So
Oh, okay,
nice
cool.
work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Cecil, I knew I was going to love yours because, you know, your story is compelling to me. And that's another thing about Memoir is that when you read it, you're also going to take on board different things depending on who you are as well. So I would say to the audience, seek out Memoir comics. It is worth your time to read those kinds of books. Thank you, everyone, very much.
Don't forget, Tracy, to introduce yourself. I don't think you ever said who
I
you
know.
are.
It's not about me. I am Tracy Edmonds. I am an educator, and I do a lot of work with comics and helping people learn through comics. And I am at tracyedmonds.com.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.